Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, heading up brand awareness at Reveal. On each episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest this week is Adam Cares. Adam is the eDiscovery manager at the law firm of Godfrey and Kahn. Adam, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to join you.
Glad to have you here. Often I'll start out by asking people what brought them to eDiscovery, but I'm going to do this a little bit of a different path here because of where we're going to go and what we're going to talk about. And I'd like to have you start first with the law firm you're at and tell us a bit about what that law firm is, what it's like, how big it is, all of that.
Sure, I'd love to. So we are a Wisconsin-only based law firm, Godfrey and Kahn, and we have, but the years I've been here, which is 21 years, we've ranged from 160 to maybe tipping over 200 one year, but right around the 200 attorney number. We practice in all sorts of law, corporate, litigation, banking, environmental. I mean, you name it, we pretty much do the majority of it when it comes to civil work and corporate type litigation. We have offices in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is our headquarters, and then we have a very large office also in Madison, Appleton, Green Bay, and then Eau Claire, near you. I always butcher how you say that, but so we have a number of offices around the state, and I would say we're a very unique law firm in the fact that we do not, have big aspirations necessarily to grow outside of Wisconsin. That could change. Of course, I'm not on the management committee, so I don't know where things are headed, but we really are focused on being the premier Wisconsin law firm. George, I think you're muted. George, you're muted.
So a premier Wisconsin law firm, if not the premier Wisconsin law firm, but still a mid-sized firm. So you're not a mega firm, you're not a litigation boutique or a firm of 5 or 10 people. But in that what used to be large law firm spot, now mid-sized firm, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We do a lot of work with the very large law firms, as co-counsel or as our adversary. And we also do a lot of work in the same vein, as co-counsel with more boutique law firms, and or go directly against some of the smaller law firms. So we, as kind of that now what I would call, and you are stating too, is a mid-tier, mid-sized law firm. We kind of reach into both spaces, and it's a unique place to be because there's challenges, going up against the largest of the law firms, but then there's also challenges with going against some of the boutique law firms, especially when you're dealing with eDiscovery and maybe the expertise that you're dealing with, on one spectrum and then the other. So it's very an interesting space to be.
So with that backdrop of the firm that you're at now and what it's like today, how did you get there? Where did you start out and what took you to where you are today?
So as I stated, I've been here a very long time, essentially my entire career, just over 21 years recently. I started actually in the library as a library clerk. right out of college, and I was very interested in law. So when this position opened up, I was like, all right, this is a great opportunity to get my foot in the door at a law firm. Little did I know at the time I'd be here 21 years later, but here I am. A couple or even a year in, I started to do some projects for the litigation team and really liked some of the stuff I was doing, and intrigued me. And a lot of the things I was doing was actually for some of the paralegals. So instead of like exploring the going to law school side of things, which a lot of people do, I decided to ultimately go and get my paralegal certificate, which I did while I was working clerking, doing the law clerk position in the library. And right before I finished that degree, I was able to transition down into the litigation team. I say down because they were the floor below us at the time, and joined that team. And it was great. It was a very good transition. As I joined that team, it was now 17, 18 years ago, I'd say. E-discovery was not necessarily new, but newer, I would say, as far as like document databases and how you deal with e-discovery, outside of printing, like in the old days. So we had Summation iBlaze, and we were transitioning to Summation Enterprise at the time, but they weren't utilized very well by the lawyers. There was one guy who had just joined the team recently, who is still my partner to this day on the team, who was starting to dabble in Enterprise because it was the first release, which, as we all know, is a no-no. Don't necessarily take on the first release of a new tool, but he did a really good job of kind of like starting to figure out all the bugs, and I stepped in and started to help him with that. And the one thing I really took hold of was the trial side of things, because we had Sanction in-house also, but we weren't really using it. So while he was really working up Enterprise, I started to work up Sanction, and we just started a team together and became experts in both of us became experts in both tools. And then we ultimately transitioned from being the litigation paralegal to the full-time lit support, which we are today.
How many of you are there today? Is it still the two of you, or is it a larger team?
So it is still the two of us, but we do have a lot of help through the paralegal ranks, and then we also obviously work with the attorneys, some of which will specialize a little bit more in e-discovery than others. So as far as the support for the firm-wide, though, it is just the two of us really doing the work in-house. Now, that's not to say we don't have a lot of expertise outside of in-house at the firm, that we have a very good network of people that we've connected with through the years to help us with larger projects when we need to go out and vend things out.
Some firms have a model where the in-house work they do is really managing the outside service providers, or ALSPs, or whatever you want to call them. Others have a team where they do as much as possible of everything that needs to be done internally, and yet others have a hybrid. Where do you fit into that mix?
So I would say we're close to doing most in-house, but very close to teetering on the hybrid as well. So we do try to utilize our in-house tools as much as possible when we're able, because we have a lot of cost savings that we can provide to the client by doing so. So if and when we can keep it in-house, meaning kind of the review and the production, processing, review, and production we do. And that also goes down to collection, because we'll do some of the collections ourselves, but generally speaking, if it's something a little bigger, we will work with either an outside forensic vendor, or we certainly have some very sophisticated clients that can do that on their own. But as far as the processing, review, production side of things, we do, I would say 80% in-house, and then about 20%, through our partners.
Why have you chosen to go that route rather than, say, the managing outside resources path?
Again, I think it really goes back to the cost savings to the client. We're able to offer what the vendors are doing in-house and really do it without charging them much upfront as far as data, when you're getting into the data costs and things like that. So if we do need to do an overbroad collection upfront for whatever reason, we can do so and really kind of weed the data down quickly. And sometimes we'll do that as kind of a hybrid approach. We'll maybe take in a data dump, sift through it, get rid of the junk, and then maybe use an outside vendor when we can, save the client a ton of that early on processing costs. Sorry, lost my words there.
One of the other ways that the e-discovery and litigation support functions in law firms differ from firm to firm is the level, the type of interaction between the e-discovery and the lit support people on the one hand, and then the lawyers, the paralegals, and others within the firm on the other hand. Everything from close collaborative partners to order takers to whatever else. How are you structured?
So we're really blessed here at Godfrey and Kahn because we are the collaboration side, the close collaboration side, and I'd say we really do a great job of that. When I first came down to the team or joined the litigation team 17, 18 years ago, it wasn't out of the ordinary where you would just get a disk or a box of documents or something handed to you and say, this needs to get produced. And it's this client. That doesn't happen today. We are very involved in the process. So early on, when a case, we're mainly defense. So when a case comes in, we are one of the first calls that the partner or lead associate makes to explain us not only, hey, here's this new case, but we get a briefing on the background of the case, kind of, the key points, key players, and we immediately start working on the preservation hold letter with them and, schedule the initial calls with the client to go over data mapping questionnaires, custodial interviews, and to develop a plan, on how best to go about the preservation and collection. So, and it varies depending on what the case is and what the facts are. So I think it's having that legal background that we have, it's very nice fit because we're able to kind of understand, what's the best way to go about this particular case because it's a never one size fits all solution.
So in addition to you having a better understanding of what you're dealing with, what are the advantages to the attorneys, the paralegals, to having this more collaborative approach?
Well, litigation support, I think, is called litigation support for a reason. We're supporting the team. Because we're collaborative, we are part of the team. We're not a help desk. We're not just dealing with issues and, taking in tickets and just returning, a simple output. What we're doing is we are helping them. So to your question, it's really guiding them along the way to come up with the best solution for their case, because we can help them come up with, very bespoke, different, unique, ways to approach a problem. And I think that's really where we fit in and how we're helping them along the way.
Are there evident advantages to the client as well to this type of approach?
Yes. So one thing that's really nice is that we have constant contact with the client. So since we are brought in early on for the data collection stage, we know the IT staff up front. They were dealing with us from day one. and we know the GC or whoever the lead lawyer is on this particular matter. And this is another advantage to the attorneys and paralegals. We can, as lit support, reach out directly to them, meaning the clients, copying our team of lawyers and paralegals, and without even having to run it by the lawyer first, assuming the relationship's there, because we've built that trust over time. So if there's a follow-up on a collection issue, or hey, there's this new custodian we need to go run down, or what's up with this data source we heard about, or we were talking to such and such custodian and they were pointing us to this legacy system. We can just kind of get the dialogue rolling without having to kind of go through, many layers to get back to the person that, ultimately will answer the question. Oh, sorry about that.
That happens to all of us. I wish I could say it never happened to me.
I actually had turned that off, so I don't know what happened there. Anyway.
Yeah. One of the so then the flip side, are there disadvantages to the approach you have taken as opposed to one where you'd be relying more on outside resources?
There is always the opportunity that we would be short-staffed in order to maybe address an issue. It hasn't come up. I would say that would probably be the situation, but because we use the hybrid approach, we do always have kind of those people in our back pocket to, go and utilize if we need to. So even if there's like a particular project that, okay, for whatever reason we can't address in-house and we haven't engaged outside counsel, but outside help with, we have a few people in our back pocket that we can reach out quickly, run conflicts, and get rolling. So, I would say the only downside would be maybe a short pickup in turnaround time. But other than that, I think I don't see too many disadvantages.
There's another question then about where law firms take very different approaches. Some firms, especially where they are relying primarily on their internal resources, do support and e-discovery work, will eat the cost of that rather than charging it through to a client. Other firms say, no, this is a cost incurred on the client's behalf and the client ought to pay for it. How does your firm approach that?
So when we do utilize outside people, we just kind of do a very basic pass-through. So that's very simple. But as far as internally, up to now, we've been very good about offering it for free. It's just something that we've had as a value add for the client. That being said, the cost to do this continues to increase. So, that may change, but it would be, we could implement the cost recovery model at some point, really to just, do exactly that, recover some costs, but really still offer a value to going out and, up to, another vendor where it could be more expensive.
There is a real challenge in figuring out which way to go, isn't there? Because if you do as you are doing, essentially roll those costs into overhead, where presumably they become effectively part of the charge for each hour of time that a lawyer or a support person puts in, then you don't have to have discussions with the client about which tools you use and which you don't and how you go about doing those things based on the cost. On the other hand, it becomes part of that overhead that everybody has to help recover. Has there been much debate or discussion internally, or has this worked sufficiently well that it hasn't needed to be a topic of discussion?
So like I mentioned, it is a topic, but I think it's worked well enough that it hasn't been, a hot topic per se. I think the value add has really been kind of the the selling point on this is that we can present this to the client early on, that we have not only expertise in-house, but we have tools in-house to take care of this. And you know what? We can't probably quantify what business that's brought us through the years, but we're certain it has. So I think that's really where management probably looks at it, that they understand that, hey, we have been getting business because of this model. If we do go to a cost recovery model, it's not going to be to, make a killing, but it's really to do a cost recovery, and just help us continue to offer good service to the client, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.
With a model such as the one you use, there is the opportunity for you and your colleague to be involved in a meaningful way at any number of stages in a lawsuit. With the models where the work tends to be pushed outside primarily, I think there are fewer opportunities for meaningful involvement. How much do you get pulled into cases at different stages?
So I'd say we're included in the case pretty much all the way through. So when discovery ends, our involvement really doesn't necessarily end, because summary judgment, there could be some key issues that go back to some of the documents, and maybe some of the metadata maybe becomes important, and key pieces of analysis that we can jump in on come into play. But beyond that, we support the trial team as well. So we still, to this day, will run hot seat and be involved at that very late stage. And I think the value add that we have is that we're able to, we know enough about the case, we know the facts, we know kind of the issues, but when a request comes across our desk, like I said, we're not ticket takers. We ask, why are we doing this? What is the end game? What is this for? And we can, because we built this rapport over the years, we can say, well, what you're asking for, we're not really ever asked to do this, but we need to get to here, which is great, because we don't even have to have that conversation of like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you asking me to do that? It's like, we need to get to this end game. How do we get there? So it's a very great environment in that regard, so where we can immediately ask questions up front, or we even get like a good inquiry brought to us, and we can then add the value throughout the case. Just recently, for example, last week there was a case where we received some interrogatory responses, something that Lit Support's not going to see too much of, but we do here. And one of the partners on the case was like, hey, can you pull these documents that are referenced in whatever? Simple request, whatever, 5-minute task. I do it, and I'm looking at the interrogatory responses, and I'm like, well, what they're saying doesn't make sense with the facts of the case. So I took and looked at the documents. I was able to really quickly determine that 80% of what they said was just flat out wrong, and they were basing their responses on some date that was produced, but they were using the incorrect date. And I did this analysis, put this chart together, and the lawyer went back to the other side immediately with it. And that's a something that we can do because we're a little more involved, and we know the facts.
It has long seemed to me that people who, as you have been through the full life cycle of a case, have been to trial, have been, as you have, in the hot seat, have a better understanding of what does need to be done and what doesn't necessarily need to be done in a case. And I would think you had that experience to bring to bear as well in matters where, and this is my guess, you can approach the attorneys and say, yes, you think you want us to do this, but maybe it's not necessary, maybe there's a better way, and this is why. Am I reading the situation correctly?
Absolutely. I mean, we have that dialogue with our attorneys daily. You know, if for whatever reason they're asking for something that in our minds doesn't make sense, that it is an open dialogue, and no one's getting upset with that conversation. They respect it. And sometimes, after a little bit more discussion, it does make sense that we're doing in this particular case. But oftentimes, if we're like, no, how about we go this route because we've had this experience in the past with a similar situation, usually that's the route we end up going. And it's a very consultative approach to how we work together.
So for those who are in positions similar to yours, but who have not, for whatever reason, developed the type of rapport I hear you talking about between you and your colleague and then the lawyers and paralegals at the firm, what advice do you have for them about how to develop that rapport?
Yeah, I would say it takes time, of course. Like I said, I've been here a long time. But one thing I would say is early on, when a new lawyer comes around or joins the team, go introduce yourself. Tell them what litigation support does. Tell them what an e-discovery manager is. Um, they're going to love to hear from you because the reality is we're here to help them. So if you're able to let them know that there's someone in their firm that has expertise in something that, quite frankly, might scare them, or that they're just interested in talking about, you build that relationship. Another thing our firm does, which is great, is we do associate training, not every year, but pretty much every other year, where we go through the full life cycle of a case, civil procedure, and there's a section where we as the e-discovery team come in and just do exactly that. We just kind of have a basic conversation about who we are, what we do, and when you should call us, really. And that's like what we really, really hammer home is call us at the beginning of the case. Don't wait till later because it might be too late. And we hammer that home early on with them. But I would say for someone maybe that's in an environment right now where that isn't actually happening, it's go around and talk to people. Talk to the partners that you may not know. If you're not getting a call from the partner, why is that? You probably should be getting calls from some of these partners because they have cases coming in. So I just, it's relationship building really, and just educating others on your team to what you do.
And then, not to close on a negative note, but what are the pitfalls they might encounter and how can they avoid them and as they're trying to build that type of rapport?
Well, I mean, we work in law, so we work with people with a bunch of very interesting personalities and dynamic individuals who are stressed. This is a very stressful job and fast paced. I would just say don't let it get you down. Find your advocates because in every law firm there's going to be an advocate of you and your team. Look, the reality is ethics tell lawyers they need to know this stuff or know someone or you work with someone that knows it. So the reality is, you are going to have advocates on your team. So I would just say focus on finding those people and working through them.
Great. Well, Adam, thank you very much. Adam Cares is the e-discovery manager at the Wisconsin law firm Godfrey and Kahn. I am George Socha. This has been e-Discovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. And Adam, once again, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, George. Have a great one.
You too.